Our stay at NFL Network continues. We're going to have a conversation now with Bucky Brooks, who loves to analyze the draft. What's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
Good.
Are you good?
I'm great.
You like this time of year?
This time of year is exciting. A lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. You know, this is a lot of fun for scouts and coaches in the building, too, because it's a different process, a different intensity level in the building, but it's still just as important as what happens during the fall, isn't it, when you're building a roster?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most important part when you think about long-term success. Like, you have to build a roster the right way so you can sustain the success. And so you have a lot of scouts in the building that are really excited to have their opinions heard. You have coaches that are just kind of making their way in the process and sharing opinions. And then you have the decision makers taking both of those opinions and kind of filtering together to see what is the best approach to take on draft day.
You know, a lot of people focus on needs when it comes to the NFL draft, but I think you guys, you know, when you're in a draft room or you're evaluating prospects, you're just looking at strengths and good players and trying to add good players to your roster. And so if your needs are on the offensive line, let's say, maybe the Minnesota Vikings, but you're sitting there and you're on the clock and there's a bunch of really good defensive players, do you have to apologize for taking a good defensive player instead of maybe a need on offense?
No, you never have to apologize for taking a really good player. Like, you can never go wrong building your team by taking the best player available. And a lot of people talk about the BPA theory. But if you take a bunch of really good players, then what it does, it gives you an opportunity, if you have a surplus at one, to trade that away to get what you really need. And so when you start reaching and taking positions of need and the players aren't worthy of it, then you're disappointed. Then you have to go back in another year and draft the same position because you overreached on a player.
What's your philosophy? Let's say you got a player who's an elite level player at his position, and I'm going to use the example of Harrison Smith as a safety. Do you like maybe focusing on young safeties to put a young guy that you can mold with someone like Harrison Smith, or are you like, nah, Harry's got that position, let's go focus on a different spot?
It kind of depends on the rest of your roster. Obviously, when you have Harrison Smith, what you're trying to do is you're trying to kind of balance and juggle when do you begin to believe that his play is going to slip versus when do we get a player in there that can kind of step into his role when he kind of fades out. And so you have to look at where he is, has he suffered injuries and the like, versus what is available in the draft. And just kind of do that delicate juggling act, balancing act, like, well, we think he still can play. If we bring another guy in, can we put the other guy at the other safety position? And so now Harrison starts, the young guy's playing the other position, and then eventually when Harrison falls away, he comes in there and you bring in another guy. So there are a couple of different ways that you can think about it, but a lot of it is if you have an elite player, you want to continue to play with the elite player and then find ways to build it around him.
How about the linebacker position? The Vikings have Barr and Kendricks, so they're set there when it comes to a two-linebacker sub-package. But sometimes you need more than two linebackers on the field, and sometimes you can get really athletic linebackers and you want to play with 3 or 4 of them. So what do you think about the linebacker class this year? And when you think of a Mike Zimmer defense or you think of Barr and Kendricks, any fits at linebacker in this year's class for the Vikings? You
know, it's tough because inside linebacker class is down this year. Like outside of the first couple guys, and everyone talk about Devin White and Devin Bush, there's a tremendous drop-off. Mack Wilson will be in there. And then outside of that, you have a bunch of guys that are solid, but they're not necessarily impact players or difference makers. And so when you think about a Trey Lamar, a Josiah Uffa, who comes from Texas, San Antonio, those guys can play, but I mean, you're talking about day 3 contributors or whatever. I think when you're the Vikings and you have 2 A-level players already entrenched at linebacker, you look to keep those guys on the field as much as possible. And because this draft maybe has more defensive backs, you may look out to fill out your nickel package and your dime packages and get better overall players on the field, as opposed to settling for someone because of a need.
Earlier, before you came in, we were talking to your guy, Rhett Lewis, about the Vikings, and he said, you know, somewhere in the middle rounds or late rounds, I'd like to see him add a playmaker or 2 on offense, a running back or a receiver. Any good fits that come to mind for you in a Kevin Stefanski, Gary Kubiak, Kirk Cousins offense at running back or receiver in the middle rounds?
It'll be interesting to see what they do because I think Dalvin Cook is a special player. Hasn't necessarily been able to show it because of injuries and coming back from that, but I think he's special. I think what you want to do is have another guy that can kind of enhance the running game. And so Darrell Henderson from Memphis is someone who can do that, averaged almost 9 yards a carry at Memphis' final season, had 22 touchdowns. He is a player. And all these guys are in the same thing. Damian Harris from Alabama is a tough guy, blue-collar runner who can enhance that. You have David Montgomery from Iowa State, who's another runner who can do it. Luckily, in this year's draft, there are a ton of running backs that are all kind of graded the same, right in that day 2, day 3 category from the 2nd to the 4th round that can play. And so it's just a matter of, is there a value guy that we like a lot, but we can get him in the 4th round? And maybe one of those guys could be a guy like a Bryce Love from Stanford.
We love coming out here to talk to you. We love watching Path to the Draft. Have a good time in the build-up to the NFL Draft in Nashville this year, and thanks for your time, man.
Hey, thanks so much.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it.